Hello, I'm your host Jim McLean. Welcome back to another episode of the Banterflix Movie Review Show. Let's see what we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be reviewing the latest A24 chiller Undertone, which is out in cinemas now. We'll look back at Rob Reiner's Stand By Me, which has been re-released to mark its 40th anniversary. And we'll wrap up as we chat about the hugely influential anime feature Akira, which is heading back to the big screen. So that's what we've lined up for you this week. Joining me in the studio is the lovely, the Terry Hooley of independent cinema, Bran Mulholland.
Hello, Jim. Thank you.
Bran, great to have you back in the studio. We were hoping to have the lovely Dr. Nicole Hamilton in, but for various reasons, she hasn't been able to make the journey from Mid-Ulster to our studio here in Belfast. But that does not mean we won't hear from Nicole later in the show, because of course, we'd have to have her on. We're talking about a horror movie later on. But before we get into that, let's have a look at some movie news.
President Snow has all the power.
Why do you submit to it all? If we can stop the games, we can stop the capital too.
The arena, it's a killing machine. But all machines can be broken.
I could see the look of the panic on your face, Bran, when I mentioned The Hunger Games just before we started to record. You may not be the biggest fan, but this is the 6th movie based on the 5th book, because I know we had Mockingjay, which was split into 2. It's going to be out in November later this year. We have a young Haymitch this time. This is set 24 years before the first film took place with Katniss. So are you excited for this? A 6th outing. Have you been a fan of this franchise?
I've only seen the first few movies, in fairness. I'm a big fan of Jennifer, obviously, but not really excited in the sense of I'm not invested in it. Whether it's, if you do a review and it's good and it makes me want to go back and relive the other ones, then so basically I'm putting the pressure back on you, Jim.
That's
if you
all right. Flattery will get you everywhere.
When
Mr.
it comes out that it's worth seeing, I'll revisit all the other ones, but I'm sure there's an audience out there if they're making the new ones.
Well, clearly there is, because otherwise they wouldn't be on their 6th installment in the franchise. I'm intrigued by this. I know my lovely wife is a huge fan of the series, huge fan of the books. I know when she read the book, I think when we talked about the teaser trailer, I mentioned this when it was released late last year. I know the book reduced her to tears at many times, so she's very excited about this. She actually, too much information, viewers, I know, she was actually watching the trailer for this while she was having a bath, to which she then texted me going, oh my God, this looks amazing. So there is someone who's clearly a fan, clearly excited about this, and I guess all the kind of themes within the Hunger Games franchise that have been there from day dot seem all too relevant in the world that we find ourselves. But we need a little bit of escapism. And of course, we've had CinemaCon this week, loads of movie news coming on. We're talking about the 6th installment of the Hunger Games franchise. Bran, you're also going to have the 6th installment in the Insidious series as well. Who knows? There's no stopping that. But another bit of news that broke earlier this week was we are going to get a remake. It's been long in the works of one of John Carpenter's masterpieces, Escape from New York. I believe JC himself is involved in the project, and we're talking about John Carpenter, not Donald Trump, on that reference. But before we talk a little bit about this remake and our thoughts on that, let's play a clip of the original.
I'm going in.
John Carpenter's Escape from New York, the high adventure of the future. One man must go in where no man has ever gotten out. John Carpenter's Escape from New York, the greatest escape of them all, is about to blow the future apart.
So that's a little bit of Snake Plissken in action, Brian. You weren't that excited about it, but another installment for the Hunger Games franchise. Intrigued, terrified, pessimistic about another outing for Snake Plissken. I'm going to come to this in a moment, but can anybody else play the role other than Kurt Russell?
In a word, no. No, I love, I even love Escape from LA. It has its own certain charm. Escape from New York's one of those movies that you've seen as a kid on TV and it changed you, you know. It's probably one of John Carpenter's best. I love the bleakness of it. The casting's perfect. The time is perfect, unless they do something completely different, which I doubt they will. I know you say Carpenter's involved, but
I believe he's involved.
He may be just cashing a check there, as he's admitted before. Yeah, give me the money and
Bills
you can do what you want.
paid, Brian.
True, he's done that with the Halloween franchise and stuff. I can't imagine anyone. Whether they're going to get Kurt Russell's son. Is it going to be Wyatt Russell? No, even then, no. I'm very cynical about it, but we'll see.
We will see. You've kind of preempted my next question. That is a great option. If I was going to pick someone, who needs to digitally de-age Kurt Russell when you have a ready-made replacement right there? But who would you cast? I guess everybody, anyone when they're casting anything, Pedro Pascal's name will probably get mentioned. But is there anybody else you would love to see don the eye patch?
While you're asking me that, my mind is like a ticker tape flicking through actors, modern actors at the minute. I can't place anyone in that role. I really can't, and I don't know whether. Russell was kind of doing his Clint Eastwood impression, so he was maybe a generation after Eastwood doing an impression of what a leading action hero would. So, what is that these days? What, other than, I have to mention because I'm on the show, other than Tom Cruise, what does an action star look like now, I can't really place anyone in the role. So maybe Wyatt Russell just...
Hey, and Brian, without getting political, because we are going to move on, to forget one of the main plots of Escape from New York is that they have to save the President of the United States. So whether
it'll be a 5-minute movie then, because he'll just go, no.
Yeah, whether in the world we find ourselves in right now, when anyone would want to save the President of the United States. But hey, we will leave the politics to Slugger O'Toole. The film hasn't been made yet. It could be the best thing ever, but we'll have to wait and see. On that note, we shall move on and talk about something we have seen.
Hear something.
Welcome to the Undertone podcast, where we talk about all things creepy. I'm your in-house skeptic, Evie Babbage, and my believer co-host says he has a real treat for us today.
We're listening to 10 mysterious audio recordings from an anonymous email.
Oh my God. Were you implying there was hidden messages in it?
Let me play it back in reverse.
Play the next one. Let's find out.
What is that? Where is that coming from?
Sing it good and loud.
So that's a look at the trailer for Undertone, the latest horror to hit the big screen with that all-important A24 branding. Great tagline, it wants to be heard. The director, coming from personal story from him, he's this writer-director. The name I will get in front of me here is Ian Tuscan, if I'm getting that correct. Personal story from him, putting in elements. This started as his audio play. Very much shows for me in the importance of the audio within this film, as we have our podcast host and co-host who's not seen. We only have 2 actors on screen throughout this movie, listening to audio, both normally and backwards. And should they really be listening to what they're listening to, Bran? What did you think of it?
I liked it.
Okay.
I did like it.
There was a pause.
I love the premise of it. And I love movies like this it's a one location. A24 do this great. They'll literally make a genre horror movie with a really good premise for probably as little as they can, because there's no main stars in this, although the leading actress is really good. So this is all about the premise. This is all about, what they can do with it. I think it reminded me a little bit of a short film from a few years ago called Host, if you remember. It was like the webcam kind of movie, and if someone said to you, this is just about a girl that does a podcast and creepy stuff happens, you'd be like, well, why do I want to go see that? But then you see the trailer and you're like, oh, actually, this is really intriguing. And then the movie, I think the first half of it's really, really, really creepy. I'd say 2/3 of it really, really got me. I think it loses a bit of momentum. The finale, which was a bit ambiguous, or too ambiguous for me, was a bit of a letdown. But the talent of this movie is to take that premise and to make it eerie, scary at times, and to use purely audio. But it sucks you in with the audio, I thought, because you're really, really focused on the sounds you hear, and then something will happen in the background.
And it's great at leading you because you have a co-host who's not seen, who's kind of saying, oh, you heard this, I heard this.
Yes.
And they'll go back and play it again. And we've seen that before. Audio and horror, it works. I mean, I often criticise a lot of mainstream multiplex horror movies, ghost trains, if you can say, cinematic ghost trains, where the composer is often delivering your scores, the quiet bang elements. And we get all that. But I love, and I come back to that point I made at the start, this is a film that started life as an audio play. The scares that are inherent within the audio, and what we've both mentioned there, that idea of re-listening to audio, listening to it backwards, going back, did you hear this? I thought someone said this, are the strongest elements. I would agree with you totally in the sense as it gets to its finale, when it does try to rely on some visual mediums, I think it loses itself, and we've seen that before. There is great elements, the creepy atmosphere is there. Don't go into this expecting The Conjuring or something like that. It's not like that. I guess the A24 brand will help it in that sense. But I do think key thing you mentioned, when you watch the trailer, I do think the trailer does missell it slightly, and you could end up maybe with a repeat of a film that comes to mind is something like It Comes at Night, which was sold to audiences, multiplex audiences, on the back of the trailer. When they got down to sit down and watch, that wasn't the film that they saw. But there's enough good things here. But look, you and I are talking about this, Brian, and as we mentioned at the start of the show, we had hoped to have the lovely Dr. Nicole Hamilton in the studio this week here in Belfast, but for various reasons, she wasn't able to make it to Belfast. And through the powers of smartphones, etc., that doesn't mean we can't hear what the lovely Dr. Nicole thought about the film. So here's Nicole's thoughts on Undertone, and more importantly, where she thought it ranked within A24's back catalogue.
A24 have produced some of my absolute favourite horror films over the last decade, from The Witch to The Black Coat's Daughter to I Saw the TV Glow. Their horror films are, for me anyway, characterised by their director's sensibility. Each one has a distinct vision that doesn't adhere to any particular formula, but rather I think several of them have really come to define 2010s and 2020s horror and are seen as pinnacles of the genre, with I think Hereditary probably being the biggest and most influential of their films. And with such an impressive back catalogue behind them, their latest horror film, Undertone, had a lot to live up to. And unfortunately for me, it doesn't quite reach the heights that I'm used to from an A24 horror film. I would hesitate to say that it disappointed me, because I certainly felt drawn in by the mystery that unfolds as the film progresses. And as a fan of podcasts, particularly those that tell scary stories, I find the format of this to be very intriguing, and I did think that it would be right up my alley. And to a point it was. There's a lot to like it here. I think one of the strongest examples is how intensely focused we are on one character for the entirety of the runtime, and how much that helps us connect to her and her journey throughout, particularly with the added layer of the sound design being such a prominent part of the film. We hear everything that Evie hears, and one of the simplest and yet most effective examples of this for me was the transition in sound as she puts her noise-cancelling headphones on to record the podcast. It's like we're transported into a different world, and what we can't hear becomes actually just as important as what we can. But this is sort of as far as the film goes for me. I find the actual execution of the podcast to be a little bit lackluster, as the files that they listen to didn't for me really warrant the fear that we see from the podcasters. And this ends up leading the resolution of the film to feel a little bit flat, as the build-up just isn't worth the payoff in the end. And ultimately it began to feel a little bit like a subgenre of horror that I thought that we had left behind in the early 2020s, which is the horror as metaphor for trauma/grief. There's hints of Evie's potentially difficult relationship with her mother that don't end up really going anywhere, and the supernatural elements of the film are so blatantly about Evie's anxieties around motherhood that sometimes it feels like the film just doesn't trust the audience to pick up what it was putting down. I wouldn't say that this is a bad watch for, like, by any means at all. And there's some moments of genuine tension, and I can feel the love for the craftsmanship behind the film. As I said, that the audio in the film is fantastic, and I think it's the best part about it. But it's not a film that I would rush back to, unfortunately.
So that's Dr. Nicole sharing her thoughts on Undertone. So I think, yes, as we've all agreed, largely positive on our front here in the studio and with Nicole about the film. And on that note, we shall move on to something completely different.
When the night has come and the land is dark,
we interrupt to bring you an update on the search for the missing 12-year-old Ray Brower.
Kid's gone. They're never gonna find him. Not where they're looking.
and the moon is the only light we'll see.
You think Mighty Mouse could beat up Superman? Mighty Mouse is a cartoon. Superman is a real guy. No way a cartoon could beat up a real guy.
Darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me.
Stand By Me. This is very much a coming-of-age movie that, watching it now in my 40s, I don't know if you felt the same way, but watching it now as an older viewer, this film hits different now as opposed to when I first watched it. Because when I watched it younger, it was a different film. Still adored it. Now I adore it and find myself getting a little bit choked up for different reasons. Are you a huge fan? I'm assuming, like me, you have seen this umpteen times.
Huge fan, and I hadn't seen it in years. So thank you for getting me to watch it again, because it's a seminal movie. It's arguably one of the greatest movies of the 80s. I'll stand by that.
I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight you on that.
But I think what you say there is very interesting, because I first watched this movie. I would have been around the age of the kids in it, so I'm seeing it and I'm part of the gang. You kind of you give yourself to a movie and that's, you're part of the gang. And that's the charm of the movie. It lets you in. You become part of them. But yes, you're right. Now you're kind of more the Dreyfus character. You're more the it makes you look back. I mean, I was thinking about holidays I had with my cousin in the 80s, and but watching this, I'm like, oh my God, those days are gone. But you maybe don't think about them enough. And if a piece of art makes you think about the perfect summer you had someday, back in your history, then that's beautiful, So the movie is stunning. The acting, how Reiner got performances out of those four, they're child actors, they're 11, 12, and interesting when you think back what we know now, that a lot of those kids were bringing their real life to the roles. Obviously it's been well documented about Corey Feldman, but when you go back and he's talked about in his book, Will Wheaton didn't have a great childhood and had a really, really similar relationship with his father that the character does. The only one who really seemed to have a normal, happy childhood was Jerry O'Connell, who's the normal, happy kid in the group. So it's to the casting credit and to Reiner's credit that he's seen something in them. I would talk all day about River Phoenix. I think he would have been DiCaprio in my opinion. He's an incredible actor, never been bad in anything, and had the world at his feet. I think they all, you talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. DiCaprio does that. They all, and name a Hollywood actor now. They all know and love Phoenix. He's James Dean good in my opinion, and this is one of his finest films. And that last shot of his character is, if you don't well up at that point, I don't know, you ain't got a heart.
Yeah, totally agree. It hits hard watching that final sequence, watching him walk away, and you hear Richard Dreyfuss's monologue and talking. And what I find watching this now, everything you've just mentioned in that sense, that the stuff that hits is Dreyfuss looking back, reminiscing, and that kind of rose-tinted nostalgia. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, I'm sure you're just like me, Brian. Everything from films, music, video games, books, everything you look back, but then those memories of friends when you were younger, school friends, etc. The perfect summer, we all have those memories, and it hits different on that front, and then it also then for me hit different in the fact that we've lost Rob Reiner, sadly through tragic events late last year, and just reminded me just what an amazing director and filmmaker he was. You mentioned, you hit the nail on the head for me, how he got those performances from those actors, how he got the confidence. And you also forget as well, you've got John Cusack in there, you've got Kiefer Sutherland in there in a small but important role, very villainous role that, he'd go on kind of reprieve in Lost Boys, but just a fab film. And Cineworld are doing a Rob Reiner retrospective. Get yourself to the cinema. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think Misery's in there, another Stephen King adaptation. I'm sure and hope that When Harry Met Sally is in there. I know we talked about Rob Reiner just before the end of the year in December when the news broke, but do you have any other films within his back catalogue you would recommend?
Obviously, I've got to mention A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Again, a movie full of amazing performances. Princess Bride, the greatest comedy that's ever been put on celluloid. This is Spinal Tap. I mean, that if you'd done one of those, if you were an artist and you were involved in one of those movies, you would be happy, to hit all of those. And interesting hearing we're talking about how well he done with the kid actors. I mean, even Fred Savage in Princess Bride, all the other performances in those movies. James Caan's finest performance, Kathy Bates won an Oscar. All of these different movies that he done, he's an actor's director, I think, so probably being a former child actor himself helped, but I'd love to see this on the big screen again.
Yeah, so as you say, if you get the chance, check out Stand By Me back on the big screen, new 4K re-release, we should say as well. And as I mentioned, Cineworld have a Rob Reiner retrospective, so other films to look out there. So that's Rob Reiner. Let's move on and wrap up with something very different. As I said, I think last week in the show, where else would you go from Undertone, Stand By Me, to our next film as we wrap up this week's show, as we look back at Akira. So that's a look at the trailer for Akira. Brian, you've mentioned you've seen this quite a few times, like me, but you are going to see this because this is being re-released in the cinemas. Lovely new shiny 4K restoration. We've already talked about one of those with Stand By Me. This is another. So here we have seminal manga, animated classic, this kind of tech noir, cyberpunk animated feature that I will openly admit, this missed me when I was young. So this was out in 1988. I was only, 6 or 7. But I was not, and probably should not have been watching Akira. I think this was re-released in cinemas or got a re-release about the early noughties. I remember seeing it again at the QFT when I went to university and thinking, wow, it's weird watching it now when you can see influence are everywhere. Metal Gear Solid, you can very much see that. There's sequences, you go, yeah, that's from that. And even as abstract as, say, South Park, you can see references in there. I thoroughly enjoyed rewatching this. You've purposely not rewatched this because you're going to see it in the cinema. So this, your thoughts now, is based purely on what I'm assuming, Brian, will be your rose-tinted nostalgia glasses.
Absolutely. I probably first seen this, it probably was on Channel 4 late one night. They were maybe doing a season of anime or whatever, and it's the anime to watch. That obviously, you know, it kind of birthed them all and that whole genre. It's my friend Roy's one of his favorite films. So as soon as it was released, it was going to be released on the big screen. He's like, bought you a ticket, okay, right? Let's do this. I can't wait to hear it and see it on the biggest screen possible. Influences are all over the place, you know. I mean, it's one of the highlights of Ready Player One when she shows up on the bike. Oh my God, it's the bike from Akira, you know. I mean, the red jacket. I have a friend who has the red jacket. It sets up a world the way Blade Runner would, you know. It's influenced the Matrix, loads of stuff, and very much it's one of those movies, kind of like Godzilla, where it's politically, if you want to get into that, it's Japan still dealing with that. The Hiroshima bomb and stuff, you know, so it's their art was at that point, and probably still is, influenced by that major real life event, you know, so I can't wait to see it. I'm going to drink it in. It's essential that anyone that with a pair of eyes goes to see it, you know.
Yeah, I came through it through the films that it influenced, and still thoroughly enjoyed it. Absolutely fab. And I know we started earlier on the show talking about remakes. This has been a project I think Warner Brothers had tried for quite some time. I think Taika Waititi was attached at one point, and that has kind of went by the wayside. But would you like to see this? I know we talk about kind of the House of Mouse with Disney, looking back through their animated back catalogues. We've seen Ghost in the Shell, I know, was remade with Scarlett Johansson, rather controversially in certain elements for her casting. But would you want to see an Akira remake, a live action?
Probably not, because this one is here, you know. But again, I have an 8-year-old son, and I'm watching a lot of movies through his eyes. And it's whether that animation, would that be as impressive to him, sitting watching it, when the amount of content that is out there and the amount of really good animation. I mentioned Mario Brothers earlier, and you can like that movie or you want, but the animation is like, if you drop that, if you went back in time to the 80s and showed someone that's like, it's earth-shattering compared to...
But Brian, they would rather watch the Bob Hoskins. We talked about this last week. They'd rather watch the Bob Hoskins Super Mario Brothers.
Well, you know, come on, it's an underrated gem, yeah. So, but yeah, no, so it would be being made for a new audience, but then that new audience doesn't know the IP, so why are you making it? So, but the story's great, and maybe a certain director can put a new spin on it or drag it into to modern day, but it's pretty much perfect. So if it ain't broke, you know, don't try and remix it.
Indeed. So Taika Waititi, if you're watching or if you're listening, if this is a podcast through Undertone, means you know, maybe it's better to let things go. So look, that is us pretty much out of time this week. So all that's really left for me to do is thank my guest here in the studio, the lovely Brian Mulholland.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks
to the lovely Dr. Nicole Hamilton. Thanks as well for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode. But for now, until then, goodbye.